Well, good evening, everyone. We're glad you've joined us. Thrilled to welcome you to our sixth panel of our series, Valpo at Work series, during the month of April. There are several more going on next week, so stay tuned to those, please. You can find them on through Handshake and our website. Tonight, we're joined by Eric Smith, who is currently the creative director at Stonyfield Organic. And I'll let him tell you more about his background as the next 50 minutes go. But we appreciate you being with us. Feel free to use the chat box to ask questions of Eric. We will get to them throughout the program. And the program is being recorded, so you'll be able to watch a replay or pieces of the replay on the Valpo Career Center YouTube channel. Okay. Welcome, Eric. I'm going to turn it over to Kelly Anthony, one of the assistant directors in the Career Center, who's going to more or less moderate the session this evening. Kelly?
Thank you, Tom, and welcome, Eric.
Thank you.
And students, feel free to ask questions. If you've been a part of these panels already, you realize that no questions are off limits. Eric is here to teach you anything and everything and answer any of your questions. So feel free to put them in the chat box or the Q&A. But Eric, I'm going to let you go ahead and showcase what you've done in your career, and then we'll get started with questions from there.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly and Tom. I'm excited to be here. I think these are fun, and I'm glad I'm able to sort of share my journey and some of the work that I've done, maybe inspire some people. I think my story, as you'll see, it's not the traditional, you go to ad school and you go to your perfect agency right out of school. I think that is what people, especially that get into advertising, think that's what happens. But yeah, let me get into it. I have a quick presentation just with some things in it. I think that would be fun and valuable for people. So obviously, hi, I'm Eric Smith. I'm the creative director now at Stonyfield Organic. And if anybody doesn't know who that or what that is, it's really the biggest organic yogurt brand in the US. And it was started in 1983 by two co-founders from New York that decided to create an organic farming school. And they actually learned how to make yogurt, and the yogurt was incredible. And they realized, why isn't all yogurt and dairy products made organic anymore? This is crazy. And so they went on a mission, and literally the company's mission is to show how organic farming is literally the best for people. It's the best for the planet. It's best for the animals. I'll get into more of that later, but, quickly in terms of like how I got here, right? It's literally Thursday. So throwback Thursday to me in 2006. This is me at the University of Wisconsin. That's where I went to school. There's our Bascom Hall. Kelly actually went there too. So I started there, and right out of college, I actually took a job as a designer. So my major was graphic design. And I moved to Phoenix, Arizona, and I worked for a commercial real estate company. So I did a lot of commercial property marketing, where they would come up with a name for a development, and then we'd brand it and then put out sales material. So it was really corporate. So after a couple of years of that, I actually ended up moving back to the Midwest, and I worked for a small agency called Spark Advertising, which is in Neenah Appleton area of Wisconsin. So it was a really small town, really small brands, but it was good because I ended up getting a lot of autonomy to do what I wanted. I was part of a small team, and I did basically what I wanted to. And my creative director was like, yeah, that's cool, or that needs work. But it was a lot of fun. But the brands were really small, and the finances were a little challenging there. So I ended up moving out east. So, the mecca for advertising in the US is in New York City. And I thought I wanted to be there, but I ended up taking a job with, anybody who was born in the 80s, Guess Jeans, right? The LA brand with all the models. Well, they licensed everything you can imagine. And I ended up working for the watches division. And so we did, marketing for all the watches and accessories and stuff. So that's what sort of led me to the East Coast, where I currently live now. I live in Newtown, Connecticut. It's not far from New York City, but probably an hour and a half out. I have two little girls. We have a dog. And so, we have the 30s life going, but that's what led me out here. Shortly after I worked at Guess, I took a job with sort of a bigger agency. So Tracy Locke is part of, anybody that gets into advertising, there's 3 big holding companies that own almost everything. And one of them is Omnicom, and Omnicom has a bunch of really famous agencies, and Tracy Locke is part of a really famous agency network called DDB. And we worked with a lot of the clients you see on the right here. T-Mobile, Heineken's brands, Sony, it's been amazing for me working there. 10 years I worked there. I just had a lot of exposure, a lot of different types of work. And I think that the sort of the moral of the story is you never know what you're going to work on. I never thought I was going to be able to do all of these things given where I started, especially in real estate. That's what I started in, but it led me to here. So a lot of the work you're going to see is from my time at Tracy Locke. Specifically, when I worked there, I worked on PepsiCo almost the entire time. I think probably 2 or 3 years I worked on some other things, which you'll see. But this is what really got me the exposure that I really wanted, and some of the best work, and some of the stuff that I'm most proud of came from Pepsi. And the first thing that I did, one of the first things I actually got to work on, which was incredible, is the Super Bowl in probably 2014 was held in New York City for the first time. And Pepsi got the opportunity to basically cover the city in out-of-home advertising. And out-of-home, for anyone who's not familiar with that, is it's billboards, it's bus shelters, it's things that are printed or digital that are, close to the ground or above the ground that normal pedestrians and people driving can see. So we designed everything. We wrote all the copy for it. I had a creative director at the time. I was a senior art director, so I was more of middle, but this was my baby for probably 6 months. So this was literally probably one of the biggest things I've worked on, but really proud of this work. And to this day, I wish I had something to this scale, but that was sort of the first thing I did, which was incredible. And then moving on from that, Pepsi does a lot of time frame marketing, meaning this was a summer campaign. So during the summer, they were launching a new innovation called Real Sugar. So it was made with real sugar. And so the idea we came up with was Real Big Summer, obviously real sugar. And so we just did a bunch of, in marketing terms, activation around that idea. We had design things. We did a paint out for Jeff Gordon. I got to meet Blake Shelton and do a photo shoot with him. We did video content with him. So it was just all around this single campaign. And then the last big thing we did, we had the world's largest claw machine. We built it secretly overnight in this part of New Jersey on the beach. So people could come up, they got a golden ticket essentially out of the crowd, and then they got to grab a ball out of this machine. And then Pepsi people would come running out of the bottom, models pretty much paid, with big signs that had the prizes, and the prizes were incredible, like trips to the VMAs or season tickets for the Yankees, stuff like that. So everything was about paying off real big. So this was another one that shortly after I started, this was something I got to work on, and it was really, really cool. And then from there, a lot of it, we did a lot of design work too. I mean, those are more, the first one was design. The second one was more of an idea. This one, we did a lot of influencer kits. You can hear my daughter in the background. She's probably going to scream during this whole thing, but yeah, she likes Daddy's work too. So anyway, this stuff is influencer kits are basically when you launch a new product or even an old one, to get the word out or to get buzz going, you create these little physical kits and you send them. And there's a lot of unboxing videos. A lot of influencers now, they do the unboxings of new products, or, especially with sneakerheads, they do the unboxing of new sneakers. So it's the same thing, but we did this for Baja Blast because Taco Bell had actually, this was an exclusive there for many years. And then they started releasing Baja Blast in gas stations. And so the idea was, let's remind people that Baja Blast is, an actual Taco Bell exclusive. And it was for the anniversary as well of the launch for it. But it's just a design thing. And we packed it with all kinds of fun Baja Blast stuff. And you could have some tickets to go get some food from Taco Bell. But This was like a design project that actually won a couple of awards, which we were really proud of. The other stuff that I ended up getting into, which I really like, is more just like conceptual work. In this case, this was when I worked on Pepsi Food Service, which was sort of what I did on the last project that was part of Pepsi Food Service. Pepsi Food Service is their division that serves any of their customers. So Taco Bell is one of their customers, Pizza Hut, Little Caesars, any of the big food service customers, as well as all their airlines. If they're serving Pepsi on an airline, then that's part of the food service division. And so this was just a fun idea for anybody who's into fantasy football. We were trying to think of like, what's a way to engage people in fantasy football that hasn't been done before. And there's something fun about that, the insight that when you lose, sometimes that's like the funnest part, because you have to do the stupid thing. You lose the bet and you have to stand in a dress on the side of the road and honk if you want to see me dance. So we had this idea that, let's just say people could enter their fantasy leagues, and the person that lost and ultimately got chosen, we would make out-of-home advertising with them. So the idea was called Play to Lose. And so this was just an idea we pitched to them. They didn't do it, but we did a lot of these types of things. They're like one-page ideas where we set them up and then we pitch like, this is a cool idea. This has legs. We can do something with this. Another one that was really cool that I really liked, this was for Mountain Dew and Pizza Hut. And this was essentially a 420 like stunt where we were going to do a CBD infused Mountain Dew and a CBD infused pizza. Essentially, we call it hot box and doobie, but it was a stunt to say that we're embracing the cannabis legalization movement and sell the pizza and the dew together on 420. The next one, this was another really fun one that I was lucky to be involved with. So Pepsi won JetBlue as the airline of choice. So the reason why this was a big deal is because Pepsi had never been an exclusive on an airline before. American Airlines had Coca-Cola, and Southwest definitely had Coca-Cola. No one ever just had Pepsi. And so when Pepsi was chosen on JetBlue, that was a big deal. And both Pepsi and JetBlue are both from New York City. So the thought was like, okay, we won this. What do we do to announce this partnership? Like, we're in New York, we do something big. And so the insight there is like kind of the problem. And that's like, in New York City, everything is big. There's noise everywhere. Times Square is so busy with advertising. Like, how do you break through? Well, the idea was really centered around what's the thing that we own in New York City? And there's actually a sign, a Pepsi sign in Queens that's been there since 1936. And it's really big. I think it's like 208 feet long or something like that. But it's an antique. It's actually a national landmark. And the thought of changing that or doing anything to it is pretty crazy. You have to get multiple layers of approval to go to the National Landmark Preservation Committee. So our idea was actually like, why not? Let's put JetBlue on the sign to announce our partnership. So that was like, it's a simple idea, right? But the execution was really, really difficult. We ended up pulling it off. We were able to add JetBlue to the sign. And that sign, the Pepsi Cola part, is like original neon with the old metal and stuff, so that we had to make it feel like it belonged there. And that JetBlue part is actually, I think it's almost 200 feet itself wide as well. But at the end of the day, the goal for this one was awareness. It wasn't so much like a design for design's sakes. It was to get media. And so the good thing about it, and the flip side, the bad thing about it, is people were pissed off about it, because they're like, why are you messing with our sign? And they didn't know why. But because of that controversy, you had people saying like, this is super cool, and then people being upset about it because they're used to that sign. The thing got 1.57 billion media impressions, which is like off the charts in terms of awareness numbers. Tons of media covered it. Almost every major news outlet covered it. So just in terms of like the success it had for such a simple idea was crazy. And this won a few awards too, which we were really proud of. The next one too, this was recent. This was actually something we did last year, and it was for the Heartland. So if talk about the Heartland, I'm talking about Indiana, I'm talking about Wisconsin, all the way down to Texas, the middle of the country. Mountain Dew had this campaign called Out Here It's Dew. And because of COVID last year, everything sort of got scrapped. All the plans that were supposed to happen for this idea got scrapped because everybody's inside. You can't do anything. You can't have crowds getting together for any events or anything. But the simple insight to that problem was that the outdoors were a true safe space. That was actually, once you got into it and people weren't, reading fear all the time, they're realizing like, I can still get outside and be safe. And so that was a simple insight, but what do we do with that now? The problem though was like, okay, we know we can be outside. People want to go back to hunting and fishing, which is really the root of this campaign. But the challenge was people were struggling financially, right? They were, people had been laid off, and realize it or not, like hunting and fishing permits to allow you to enjoy the outdoors and do your sports are actually quite expensive in some cases, especially if you just lost your job. So this idea was the outdoor stimulus. So we were drafting off the stimulus checks. So what we did is we gave away $300,000 to people that literally all they had to do was sign up, and claim essentially a redemption for them to get their hunting and fishing licenses. So again, a super simple idea, but it got a ton of awareness, and it actually got people outside, which was the idea and the goal. So really, this one was cool too, and I think we're going to win another award for this as well. So then after PepsiCo, I sort of did, well, in the middle of it, I moved on to beer. So at Tracy's Dog, it was like Pepsi or beer. And a lot of the work you'll see was from either Anheuser-Busch or Heineken. And the first one that was really fun to work on was Budweiser always does this campaign / program in the summer called Bud and Burgers. It's really, tying the great American beer with like the great American food. And so there was a lot of fun copy written, the original power couple and things like that. And that was sort of the tone of this stuff. But in terms of what we got to work on all the fun stuff around it. We did the festival, which is in the middle. There was a big festival in St. Louis at the brewery. We got to design all the cups. We did all the merchandise. We did, the in-store displays and things where you merchandise the burgers and the beer and all kinds of just like cool things that went along with the campaign. So this one was a really fun to work on. And then sort of pivoting from that was also the summer that the Olympics were happening. That was like 2016. The Olympics were happening. The presidential election was that year. And so I was fortunate enough to work with the US Olympic team, and we did a photo shoot, and we had, we used their imagery all across any of the Budweiser stuff that we use them on. But that was just sort of related to that Bud and Burgers thing, because it was almost like the all-American summer. So that's one thing that as I sort of progressed, I got a lot more ownership over stuff like this, like productions, where I got to go film commercials or direct talent. And that's me in the bottom right next to the photographer. But yeah, you'll see some of that in here. As I progressed, again, I got to be sort of more the owner of all these things. And then another fun thing, anybody's an NFL fan, the year that Bud Light, they introduced the team cans. They've done them for many years, but this is the year that they really simplified them. And it was all about like using the can in place of the team. So the can that miracles are made of. And I think for the Colts, we wrote, have a Colt one. So it was like having, copy allude to the can as part of the team. And so we literally wrote every team's can line. I know it's flying through quickly, but this was a copywriting exercise, which again, it's like something that I didn't start off doing, but as I progressed to be a creative director, I had to have a point of view on copy and know what was good and know what wasn't. So that was, again, more of a copywriting exercise, but it was a lot of fun. Another thing from that exact same year, that was like 2016, they did this Bud Light party campaign with Seth Rogen and Amy Schumer. And this was more copy as well, where it's like having fun with this fake political party that was all about just having fun. So be a part of something refreshing. There's no time like now. Change you can believe in on a change tray. Just a lot of fun stuff, like lighthearted things around the election that we got to write a bunch of copy for. Another thing we did for Anheuser-Busch, which was really fun, is we designed their coolers, which sounds wild, like, the agency that does a lot of this other work designs their physical coolers, but this was just, again, sort of just a snapshot of just all the different things we did. And these were, you know, I know you guys are close to Chicago, so Goose Island is probably near and dear to your hearts, but these were just concepts we pitched for different cooler designs that they could put in their stores or put into events or whatever. So after I worked on Anheuser-Busch, I was able to work on Heineken, which owns Dos Equis, and Dos Equis was sort of like my brand. And another thing we did, which was really fun for designers, be able to develop identity systems for different things. And this was a rebrand of the, and I can't remember what it was called, but it's basically the Live Nation Pavilion in Dallas. It's where all the Live Nation shows are done. Dos Equis bought the naming rights. So then we had to come up with like, well, what's the identity? What's the logo? What's the experience look like? So we were able to design this. And then, as you can see, that the stuff was put all over the stadium. We had this event space that we designed as well, just for engagement and everything. So one of the big sponsorships that Dos Equis had forever, and maybe, you know, I'm talking to the right people, but college football was their big sponsorship. So this was a really big deal to them. They paid a lot of money through ESPN to have the relationship with college football and the playoff specifically. So we did this campaign, Game Day Over Everything, which was all about, you know, you will do anything for college football Saturday. And so the design that you see here, that was all shot. We shot the people in the background and the stadium, and then even the products themselves, we shot those completely from scratch. A lot of times in advertising, there's like 3D models of things. We actually went out and shot these things with real photography. And so as part of that, we also shot a lifestyle. So we went out to California, to the Rose Bowl actually, and we set up like a fake tailgate, and we shot, you know, people having fun, interacting with Dos Equis, having food, basically just a big tailgate shoot. And why you do that is because from that one day of shooting, you have a library of images you can use forever. And so for college football, they knew we're going to have college football for many years. Let's do this. Let's spend the money, and we'll have imagery we can use across all of our different channels on social, you know, all over the place. So this was a lot of fun because this was like my production. I got to direct everybody, and it was a lot of fun just to go to the Rose Bowl. So this was a really cool one. And then as part of that campaign, aside from the shoot, we did a lot of other stuff. We did the statue that they had at the most interesting fan contest, which was also part of this idea. So people would submit like, I'm the most interesting fan of college football. And the statue is what they got. And they also then made a statue of them. And I think some kid from LSU won it. And they made a statue of this kid at LSU. And then just some other things, like obviously out of home, we did displays in store, we did t-shirts. So yeah, that was Dos Equis college football. And then similarly, I put this in here because, you know, we worked on Dos Equis, but a lot of different brands have a portfolio of different products. So how do you take those brands and sort of translate them into more of a portfolio play? This is also an example of, I mentioned before, if you have photography of, you know, products that are either rendered or modeled, you can see on the left that those look fake, right? The right, that's a real photograph of all of them together. So we shot all that together, but that's how we start. We start with a comp on the left, and then if we sell it in and they give us the money, we go out and shoot it. And in that case, we ended up shooting a bunch more. We had just Dos Equis stuff. We had Dos Equis and Tecate. We had partners like Clamato, who, you know, we mixed Dos Equis with Clamato, and you have a Michelada. So it was a whole lifestyle shoot, similar to the way that we did college football. But just again, showing that you never know what you're going to work on. Like I thought I was going to be working on mainly Dos Equis, but I had to sort of problem solve for all these other brands. So this takes me to sort of now. And I explained a little bit about Stonyfield, but what I'm excited about Stonyfield is their big thing is literally like, we want organic everything, like organic farming and organic dairy specifically. It really can have an impact. There's so many environmental impacts with pesticides in farming, with the food you eat. And those pesticides getting into the food you eat and the meat you eat and the milk you drink, and also just the environmental impact of farming in general. And organic farming is so much less of a contributor to climate change that they really believe that, specifically in dairy, that organic farming is everything. And so much so that on the left side, they had this amazing idea, and this, I was not around for this, but it's just, it excites me based on how awesome this was. They have this campaign called Stony Fields, which is essentially, they're trying to push for every major park in America to become organic. So where your kids play, there's no pesticides, there's no, harsh chemicals that are used in the lawns. And so this is a national push they've been doing for a couple of years. And if you look in the lower left, I put this in here because they've also partnered up with the city of Chicago. And so Grant Park will be organic and pesticide free by 2025, which is really cool. And they just have a fun brand. Like they have a New England vibe. They have a really rich heritage up there. And I'm very proud to be sort of the lead on this stuff now, because I think that there's so much more opportunity for us to push the creativity within the work, make a little bit bigger splash every once in a while. And that's sort of what I'm doing now. So the one thing I'll just say is, like, why do I get excited about this stuff? Why, especially as a creative? I don't know how many people are in the audience who are creative specifically, but I know a lot of you are marketers, right? This is Bill Bernbach. He's a founder of DDB, which was like my parent agency. He's literally the prototypical madmen, right? Madison Avenue guy, grew up in that era where everybody looked up to the creatives, but he said something that they still say today. And I think the culture that's sort of important within an organization, whether that's you're in a brand on the brand side or you're at an agency, is that creativity really is the most powerful force in business. Like, I really believe that brands that have great creative, their products could be, they're commodities, right? Like, commodities meaning that there's one of everything and they're all the same. Creative is what sets them apart. And that's what gets people to love your brand. So I just want to leave you with that, because this is what gets me excited about doing what I do, is that there's always a creative solution to any problem. And that's what makes it fun. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Eric. That was awesome. I'm going to start off with the first question, but please, anyone feel free to put questions in the chat box or the Q&A. But what comes to mind first, Eric, is you get pitched, you have to have this pitch to a company, or internally, and you're supposed to come up with something. How does that process even work? What individuals are involved?
Yeah.
Who comes up with ideas? How does that process go about?
Well, as I've learned in an in-house environment, like I work in an in-house environment, right? I am the agency. But in an agency pitch or agency world, the brand comes to you, the agency, with a brief. And the brief has, these are our goals, these are objectives, these are any guardrails or information you need to know. This is the problem to solve. Like in the instance before, we have a new product. How do we launch it and get awareness of it? That comes into the client. And in an agency, a lot of the marketing people that work with us are account people, right? And the account people sort of take in the brief. They set up a kickoff to show the creative team the brief and answer any questions. From there, usually, that's where you have time baked in. The creative team goes off and thinks of ideas. And it starts as just brainstorm anything you want to say, write it down on the whiteboard. And as you work, you start to slowly group things together and build ideas, and then tighten them. And then sometimes if there's pieces that you didn't address that were in the brief, like we need a PR thing, and then you think about PR thing. And plug those into the appropriate ideas. So it's really a process where you iterate to get to an idea that has legs and has things that make it cool. And then from there, as you can see, like I love putting together presentations. I think that presentation is everything. Like your presentation has to be amazing. Otherwise, your job is, when that presentation happens, to go back to the client, that presentation sells those ideas. If you don't present it well, those ideas are dead. So that's sort of how that works, is brief, work on it, tighten. Then you have a round one presentation back to the clients with those ideas. And then from there, it evolves, round two or round three, to the final point when the work is approved and you know what you're doing, and then you go out and make it.
To
Eric,
follow-
this is Tom. Just to follow up real quickly on that. Sorry, Kelly. How many people are involved in something like that? Are there 3 or 4 of you?
Oh, yeah, a lot. So again, most agencies are, what's cool about that world is it's super collaborative. You don't just have the creatives working on it. You have the account team pitching in. You have a strategist who maybe is really into the weeds on data and stuff, but they, as a collaborative group, that could be 20, 30 people at first working on throwing ideas out there. And at the end of the day, the creative director and maybe a handful of people start to craft them into bigger things. So at first it's a big group, and then it sort of, shrinks down into sort of the key decision makers. And then a lot of people in my world, when we present ideas, once we get the ideas written, we have some beautiful sell story that leads you into the idea, then you make the presentation. And that actually involves more people, where a lot of the designers will help work and craft the presentation with visuals that support things. And so, yeah, it's a lot of people. I would
Great.
say probably sometimes 30 people work on
Great.
this.
Thank you.
Eric, to follow up on that, is it a coin toss for who gets to present to the client?
No, it's usually, honestly, it's usually the creative director or the senior most writer. So presenting is hard. Like when I first started, I thought I was horrible. I was nervous. But the more senior you get, the more easy it becomes, and you're able to read the room. You're able to like dodge questions, and that's also part of it. Is like you can't just present off the page. You have to be nimble. So usually it's the more senior people. However, I think that over the years, we've identified people who are really good right out of the gate, and we give them the opportunity. So it's not to say that people that are not more senior don't get to do it. We definitely were able to, or provided that opportunity to people, especially if you're a designer, you just wanted to present your look or your design. That's something that gives people practice. And so we would do that for them for sure.
That's fantastic. I have a couple questions from the audience, Eric, and they kind of go together. So I'm going to piece these together. So students, if you want to add more details to this, please do. But they're really wondering how they can brand themselves to the job market, and tips you have for breaking into the industry and nailing that interview for graphic design, marketing, etc.
Sure. So things are different now than they were. So when I started, I needed to have a portfolio book, like a book, literally, where I had my printed pieces and I'd have to show them to people in person. Now, the first thing you need is a website, like straight up. If you don't have a site, most people that are searching through the recruiter sites or whatever, they go to your portfolio. They don't even look at your resume. So that's the first thing, is even if it's all student work, you definitely need a portfolio, and it should be digital. The other thing that I found now that different back when I started is LinkedIn is huge. And I'll say this because just recently, LinkedIn is how I got this job with Stonyfield. I don't even know if they had this thing posted. And because I know someone who knows someone, and I basically found out about it before they even decided to post it. Having connections and network, like, especially if you're a student, I would network with alumni. I would network with anybody who's in the industry now before you're looking for a job, because it really is, the cliche is true. It's like, it's who you know. So that's a big piece. And then I just think today's world is not so regimented in terms of like, this is what I want to do. And, back in the old days, it was like creative and account were separate. The more collaborative you are and open to collaborating, and with that said, being a team player, that's huge now, because collaboration is key. That's how things get done and get done fast, instead of like the creative team only does this and they are the only ones that touch it. I think that having a collaborative spirit is big.
On that note, Eric, if any of the students that are listening right now have not started a portfolio, what tips do you have for them to start off that first draft? Where do they go? That kind of thing.
I think for people, so there's two ways to go about this. If you're a web designer, then yeah, you want to design your own site, where you build it from scratch. But most people, even designers, are not like super code nerds. So I would say that Squarespace is pretty good. What's the other one? There's two, the Squarespace and the other one, where it's like a DIY, easy plug and play, set up your website. It should look nice. And in terms of that first draft, start curating projects. And one of the first things I learned right away that I didn't really quite understand until later is that when you get into agency land and more like holistic thinking, they want to see in your portfolio, not like, here's a poster design I did or single one-off things, right? They want to see holistic campaigns. And that doesn't mean like some of the stuff I showed you where there's a million different things that happen. It's more to show that your idea had legs other places. So if you have a poster design, show how it comes to life on a t-shirt, show how it comes to life maybe, on a bus shelter or a billboard. And then if there's like a concept behind it, maybe have some sort of, the term we use is activation. Like, how do you engage people in real life? If your idea is all about, the Bud Light party, for instance, right? That was that thing. Do you have a Bud Light convention where you invite people? So it's like thinking of things conceptually and trying to find other ways to bring the idea to life. And that's how you show the idea in your portfolio, instead of here's a poster design, here's a logo. Does that make sense?
Thank you. I have another question from Nick, and he said, where do you start as far as designing? He understands people take notes from what the client wants, then they often create mood boards and or sketches. Is there anything else that you do when you start a design?
Mood boards, I think mood boards are huge, especially now. Like, we can quickly go and find amazing inspiration for anything. Like, if I have a thought, I can pretty much find 5 pieces of what I'm thinking before I even have seen it. I can find examples of it. So mood boards are great, not only to help start the process internally, but we also use them to share with the clients, being like, here's where we started and we saw this, we were inspired by this, and then we start designing. So definitely mood boards. What's crazy is that I used to draw a lot and I sort of like stopped sketching. I'm not saying that you should. That's just something that's not part of my process anymore. But sketching is big if you're really good at it. And a lot of designers who are really, really technical to the point they're doing hand lettering or they're designing identities by hand. Like, I still do that, but I'm so attuned to Photoshop and Illustrator that I can do things way faster and using those tools. So yeah, I think I answered that. That's sort of how I go. But everybody's different. I mean, it depends. I think you have to find your own process as to how you're going to design things. Definitely get inspiration from somewhere. Use the tools that you know, whether that's Photoshop, Illustrator, or sketching. And then also, I would say this: get critique. Like, go to somebody and say, like, does this look good? It's good to have feedback from people because you get used to it. You're going to have feedback all the time. So,
speaking of that, have you had ideas of yours just completely get,
all the time. I will say, not to discourage people, you probably execute 10% of what you present the way you want it, right? Or even close to the way you want it. There's a lot of churn in advertising. There's a lot of decks that go nowhere and ideas that go nowhere. The cool thing about that is, if it's really good, you turn around and present it to somebody else. So there's always that. But yes, get used to people not buying it. Because at the end of the day, especially if you work for an agency, like, they're paying you to do this. So if they don't like it, they can go ask you to do something else. And so it is a service. And if they paid for your hours, like, they certainly paid for it, but that doesn't mean they have to buy the idea.
Makes sense. So for the students in the room that want to break into the industry, Eric, do you have any tips for them? And how, obviously you talked about networking and how the job you have now was all based on LinkedIn, essentially. what other tips do you have for them to start building that network if they don't have it now?
So I can't really speak to the marketing folks, but for designers or creatives, I think the first thing I would do is join your local AIGA, which is American Institute of Graphic Arts. You don't necessarily have to join because I think that's like a membership where you pay for it, but go to their events. Like they have free events. Every city has an AIGA. There's definitely one in Chicago, definitely some in Indy. It just depends on where you live. But they have like events and you can meet people that are professionals and that have talks and all those things. They also do portfolio reviews. I don't know, when I was at Wisconsin, there was an AIGA portfolio review where all the schools from around town were invited to have the seniors come out and present their work and then critique it. So you'd have like people working in the industry come to that. Trying to think. I mean, it is really just like getting involved in sort of your profession's events, even as a student, because there's always networking events for any given profession. And I think getting involved in that, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Again, things have changed a lot for me. I'm trying to think of since I started. Online exposure is really big, like it really is. And I think, again, that comes to social media and how powerful that can be. Interning, of course, that's probably first and foremost something I should have mentioned, is get an internship if you can in the summer, especially with everybody being so close to Chicago. Tracy Locke does have an office in Chicago, and I remember we would be begging for interns, begging. People would apply, but it was never enough. So I would highly suggest getting an internship, because we ended up hiring a lot of those interns after the good ones when they were done with school.
That's a really good point. Karsten has a question for you, Eric. Do you recommend starting at a small company and do everything? Or do you recommend starting at a bigger company and learn from senior team members with less important tasks?
Ooh, see, the weird thing about me is like, I did all the small things first, right? So I don't know if there's a right answer to that. I think you'll figure out what you like, I guess. Your ways of working might be, personal to you. Some people don't like being at a big company and feeling small. Some people like being important right away. It really depends on your personality. But at some point in your career, you'll go to one of those places regardless. Like there's always this like, grass is greener on the other side. And then you're like, oh, wait a second, maybe I like the agency better, go back to the agency. That's kind of what happened to me. So yeah, I don't think there's a right answer for that. It's more of you'll know it when you start. The key is, from my story, is I started at a commercial real estate company. Like never in my wildest dreams did I think I would be doing Pepsi stuff. So you just never know. It is, I will say this though, don't be discouraged too if you don't get that dream job out of school, because it is a hard thing to land that like amazing job right out of school. It really is. You kind of have to work at it. You have to really like it, and you'll get your opportunity. So,
Eric, this is Tom. You've moved around quite a bit geographically. Any suggestions, observations, tips there for students?
Yeah. So, I mean, once you sort of get into the game a little bit, you realize that most of the good agencies or good work are done out of New York City, Chicago, LA, to some extent Miami. But that's changed a lot recently. I think there's a lot of like up and coming small agencies that have really creative work, and they're well respected. So that geography thing is sort of dissolved a little bit. But definitely the closer you are to a major city, the more opportunities you're going to have. And Chicago has traditionally been, number 2 in terms of the really fun, creative stuff that has come out for any major brand. And there's so many headquarters of major brands in Chicago. There's Gatorade and Pepsi has a bunch of their brands there, and you have Miller Coors, you have Harley up in Milwaukee. So and McDonald's too. I mean, McDonald's is huge in Chicago. So you definitely have a home base of a bunch of different clients in Chicago, as clearly New York you do. But yeah, I mean, it really, it's wide open now. There's a lot, again, there's a lot of small agencies that are doing really good work that are in the middle. There's some in Kansas City, right? And they work for clients all over the place. So it would be easier, I think, to break in the closer you are, though, to these major metros.
Eric, oh, Nick just came in with a question here. I know it can be hard for a freelancer to handle a project as big as the ones that you have worked on. What areas of design are better suited for freelance designers to prosper?
So, what's funny you say that. In my recent experience, the freelancers we'd hire were specialized, meaning like we didn't have that talent. We needed to freelance someone to get it. There's always that specialized talent that we need that we might not be able to use all the time. But I think that for freelance, that can be you as well. If you're really good at something, you might, quite honestly, make more money on your own because you are so specialized that not everyone can use you all the time, but when they do, they pay you really good money. So I wouldn't necessarily say that, freelance is never going to work on things like that. The other thing, unfortunately, for freelance sometimes comes when, an agency can't hire full time because of finances right away. So we've had freelancers work for us for a year, right? And they were sort of part of the team. It was just because of finances at the time we couldn't hire them. So freelancing is a viable option, I think. It is harder though, because you just don't have that safety net. People who get really successful in freelancing start out as, at an agency and maybe like develop their skills. And then they become so good that they're like, I don't need you anymore. And they go work on their own. Specifically, I know a guy, his name is, you should look up his work. It's amazing. His name is Orlando Orosino. And I don't know if there's like a follow-up to this video where I can put like notes or whatever, but he started at Tracy Lock as an illustrator. And now he's incredible. This guy he did one of the illustrations that was on the cover of Adobe Illustrator, like the graphic that shows up when you open the program probably 5 or 6 years ago. He does all the Marvel posters. Like he's wild. And that was his story. He started off as just working for the man and then got so good that he went off on his own. So yeah, freelance is a whole nother ball game where it all varies.
Thank you. We have another question from Zhao. What is something that you wish you learned earlier rather than later?
I have two things. The first one is, especially if you're a designer, you think to yourself, I don't need to know anything about marketing or business or any of that stuff. I'm just going to make shit. I'm just going to make cool stuff. And you slowly realize that the smarter you are about that stuff, or at least you're what's the phrase? Like good enough to be dangerous, right? Like, enough that you can speak the client speak, the better. And so learning the business that you work on is important, even if you're a designer, like what they sell, what their problems are, who their clients are. If they're, in my case, we're a yogurt company and we sell to people, but in reality, we sell to the retailers that sell our yogurt. So they have to sell to the grocery stores. They have to sell to whatever. And that's kind of how that works for any CPG companies. You're really selling to the retailer. But anyway, you have to learn the business. That's one thing that it took me a while to understand. Because then you can be more persuasive. Like you have actual arguments when you present an idea from a business case, because that's what those people are looking for. They want business results from your idea, not because it's a cool idea. They want to know that it's going to sell stuff. The second thing I learned is that you have to have thick skin and you can't be precious. Like you can be precious about an idea and get salty and get angry that someone didn't choose it. Or you can be bristly about, about the work with someone who doesn't understand it. And at the end of the day, that's going to happen. And you just have to move on. They say throw a fit in your office and then open the door, and it's it. You're done. You move on. So that's one thing. It's like, and it also comes down to, like, personally, I was that person. I was like, this is amazing. Why can't you see this? And you just piss people off. So you have to be a little bit more understanding and be able to take that this is going nowhere. Let's just move on. So
Great advice.
yeah, I think that's advice for anything, really.
Yeah. Another question is, what other types of skills, qualities, and characteristics would be helpful wanting to go into this type of work?
I would say, if you're still in school and you're a design major, take some marketing classes. Or if you're in marketing, take some design classes. The thing about being a creative and in advertising is it's not, a lot of it is culture. Like you're a culture sponge. When something cool happens in the news, like, oh, what could we do for our brand that's related to that? So it's timely. So as dopey as this sounds, like watching TV and knowing current events and, reading publications that are related to your business or the clients you work for or whatever, even in school, you kind of have to be up on the now, because things change. Like what I did 2 years ago is drastically different than I do now. The technologies I used 2 years ago are drastically different. Like TikTok didn't exist, but everyone wants a TikTok idea now. So you really have to be like nimble, and you learn all the time. Like you're constantly learning.
Thank you, Eric. We have time for just a couple more questions. So if anyone has one, a burning question, make sure you get it in the Q&A box or the chat box. But I do want to know, Eric, what would be your biggest day-to-day challenges with the job and the work that you do?
So this will sort of be, I think this is universal to any creative at an agency, is timing. Like client, this I don't think this is ever gonna get fixed anywhere, but things come in and they're like, we need it in 2 days. That happens, right? You always wish for, I want a week, I want 2 weeks for this. That's always a challenge. And you always have to be like understanding that when a job comes in, sometimes the account person that's working with you can't really say no. They can't tell the client, no, we're not going to do this at all. So there's a lot of, you have to be good with politics. Like you have to be able to say like, we'll do this in 2 days if we can move this job over here. So it's a lot of time management and like being a good politician to sort of create time for the stuff that needs to be done. The other thing that I'm running into now is just cultures are different, and ways of working are different. So right now, what I'm literally doing is creating a briefing process. I'm creating a culture for a team they've never worked in an agency before, but they're all super talented, but they've never been empowered to, like I said, get up in front of a client and present ideas. And I'm trying to get them all excited to be like, this is my idea and I want to present it to the CEO of Stonyfield because I can. So that's my challenge now, is like creating this culture and creating a team that feels empowered and inspired to do good work. And I think that's one thing that I'll say is like, I do less and less design stuff now. I do more mentorship. I do more, big thinking and making sure things make sense from a strategy standpoint. But I also, I like working with young people. I like seeing people who have super talented, like I can spot them a mile away. I'm like, you're going to be really good someday. And so that's fun for me.
I don't see any other questions coming up. Tom, I'm going to let you close it out, but I just want to say, Eric, thank you again. I'm honored to have you as our guest this evening. And it's one of my good friends too. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, this was fun.
Eric, it's fantastic. Lots of great information. We really appreciate you taking the time. You have a busy life, obviously, and probably other things to do in the evening. But I know the students benefited tremendously by hearing some of your ideas, your experiences, your perspectives. So Thank you.
Sure, no problem. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you very much. Students, as we mentioned at the beginning, there are more of these panels, another week's worth next week. So tune into those. They'll be hopefully helpful and beneficial. You can follow us on Instagram at Valpo Careers. See all the details about all